All right, hello everyone. Thanks for coming. My name is Jeff Slay. I'm from St. Louis, Missouri. I'm the opening act, so please don't boo me off the stage. I know you paid to see Aajonus, but he asked me to give him a little testimonial before I introduce him. So in October of 2000, this is how I got to know Aajonus. In October of 2000, my health kind of fell apart, and I was chronically fatigued, losing weight uncontrollably, and I was eating everything I could get my hands on, and couldn't stop the weight loss, and the exhaustion was intense. I couldn't make it up a flight of steps without keeling over. So I guess like everybody at that point, you no longer have the health to continue working. So I started exploring health and ways to get me better. My doctor and the hospitals really didn't have much to offer because all of my tests, and I took every test under the sun, more or less came back, fine. And so it was a mysterious chronic fatigue weight loss syndrome. So over the next 3 years, I probably tried every alternative diet, supplement, clinic, you name it, I tried it. Of course, didn't even understand the concept of raw foods and enzymes and all that and how crucial those are to the body. So after 3 years of continued fatigue and weight loss, I was down to 78 pounds. And so finally, someone told me about Aajonus, said, this is really powerful stuff, you ought to give him a call. So I did, I contacted him, and after 3 years of weight loss, as soon as I started the diet, I immediately felt something in those foods that was making it happen for me. So I started just gaining 10, 12 pounds a month till I got my normal weight back. I'd put on about 70 pounds in my first 6 months, and it was athletic weight. This was not, lazy weight. This was, I felt excellent, So I've been on the diet a little over 3 years, and, I absolutely feel better now than I did prior to even becoming ill. So it's been a real blessing for me, and I'm very lucky to have gone through what I've gone through to learn what I know now. So I look forward to, the rest of my life doing it right. So anyway, without further babble, I will bring on Aajonus.
Okay, what I want you to understand with this particular workshop is your work is to pay attention. Usually a workshop is when you're interacting, but when you're going 6 hours of information, you're going to have to work to pay attention. Okay, so that's your job in the workshop, is to try to stay with me. Now what I'm going to do is try to familiarize you with the human body in very simple terms so you're not afraid of it, so you know what's going on in your system. Now, if you look at your papers, you'll see on the third page, you'll see the bloodstream. And that's the picture to your left. Now, the other picture adjacent to that is a cell, whether it's a blood cell or a liver cell, no matter what kind of cell it is, they have that basic structure. They have an organ. They're called organelles. These are the organs and glands within a cell. So it's like a micro us, only a different shape. Some of us are nice and round like that, and those who are, they're healthier. We should all be round and healthy, and you'll understand that as I get into this. So you see how nice and soft and squishy all the different blood cells are there. You can see how radiant they are, how alive they are. The red blood cells, their main job, and their only job if you're healthy, is to transport oxygen and to relieve carbon dioxide out of the body. That's the pure job of the red blood cells. Of course, because we're so toxic, our blood gets involved in doing many different things, distributing nutrients, moving toxins, everything that they're not supposed to do. But if you're healthy, that's all the blood does. Takes care of your energy level. So imagine if the blood didn't have to do anything else but transport oxygen to give you energy and vitality to be able to use fats as fuel. And you only had to remove the carbon dioxide, the waste product, from utilizing fat as fuel, or carbohydrates as fuel, or anything as fuel. Then you would have so much energy, it would be exceptional. Everybody would be vitally healthy, happy, and everybody could be an athlete. So why isn't everybody an athlete? Because of all the toxicity, and we're going to go heavily into that. From the bloodstream, there we have the neurological system. The neurological system, its job is to transmit electricity and light for messages. Very simple. Electricity and light, it's a conductor. But what does that mean? What transports light and electricity? Metallic minerals. So that means any free radicals that get into your body from air pollution, from cooking your foods, whatever, goes to your brain and nervous system. 80% of the heavy metals go to your brain and nervous system. So you wonder why people are crazy. That's why. The brain does not function properly. When it's sending out too many signals, it's erratically sending out messages when it's not supposed to because of all the heavy metals. Then we have the lymphatic system, the third circulatory system. The lymphatic system's job is to feed every cell in the body and to remove all the byproducts and waste, except for the carbon dioxide. The lymph system feeds every cell in the body and removes all the waste. It has to take the poisons, it has to neutralize them, it has to dissolve them, neutralize them again, and send them out of the body. And that neutralization process is quite complex with nutrients. It takes a lot of phosphorus, potassium, magnesium, and calcium to turn those acrid substances into neutral pH balances to send them out of the body safely. So you lose a tremendous amount of calcium, phosphorus, potassium, and magnesium on every toxin that is in the body. If the toxin is a mercury, which is the most deadly neurotoxin that the human body can ingest or consume or breathe, takes anywhere from 200 to 2,000 fat cells or white blood cells to surround one molecule of mercury, or a combination of calcium, phosphorus, potassium, and magnesium to bind and control that one molecule of mercury so it doesn't do harm. You've seen zits that come out. If you've had that analyzed, you'll see there may be a couple of thousand molecules of a toxin, yet you'll have a couple million white blood cells or fatty cells involved in that pus. Just to control 1,000, you've got millions. So understand how complex the system is when it's poisoned, how hard the body works to eliminate those poisons, and what it has to spend in nutrients to do it. So if you realize that, you'll know how many nutrients you have to get in your system. And you'll find out what has nutrients and what doesn't throughout this workshop. So the lymph system is responsible for feeding every cell and eliminating toxins. Where does it eliminate them? It will dump them out the mucous membranes. That means the mucous membranes in your nose, in your throat, your esophagus, your intestines, your vaginal cavity, your rectal cavity, your urine, any of that tract it will dump. Most of it goes out the skin in perspiration, out the pores. Remember that. The skin is a larger bowel than your own bowel. You secrete more poisons out the skin than you do your bowel, because your bowel is not meant to be a discarder, nor is your skin. We're not meant to be poison people. So, from the blood, the neurological system, and the lymph system, those you have to understand will change more readily and quickly than others, because they have a direct link into the digestive tract where nutrients can get to them immediately. So the blood, you can regenerate it in 60 days, every cell in it. 60 to 80 days, depending upon the particular person's system. The neurological system will take a little bit longer, about 6 months, to regenerate all the fluid. We're not talking about changing the brain and nervous system cells. We're talking about the fluid system within it. It takes about 6 months to redo it. In the lymphatic system, it takes about 2 years to replace all of it because we've congested it so terribly. Okay, so those you need to focus on. Now, what are they connected to? What keeps the body moving? We have glands and we have organs. So let's take the digestive tract. We take food into the mouth. Now, there's a lot of vegetarians that scream, we have vegetarian teeth. We have herbivore teeth. You take a look in a horse's mouth or a cow's mouth and you compare it with yours and you tell me you have an herbivore's dental structure, and I'll be amazed. Because we have all cutting teeth. They have molars all the way around. All they have is molars. Big, large, fat teeth for grinding. All of ours are cutting all the way back to the canines and even back, and then all of a sudden we hit the molars. So we have about 3 molars. If you have your wisdom teeth, you might have an extra. So on each side, on all sides. And that can grind and crush meat, not for vegetarian appetite or diet. Also, we have the ptyalin enzyme. The only other animal that has the ptyalin enzyme in the mouth is a horse. That's why the horse likes sweets so much. Ptyalin helps break down sugars, sweets. Remember that. Ptyalin breaks down sugars, carbohydrates in the system. As the food goes down, it goes down into the stomach, where it receives a massive amount of hydrochloric acid. Now, dogs and cats, the felines and canine families, have 15 times more hydrochloric than we do in the stomach. And a lot of vegetarians say, oh, we're not meant to eat meat. Dogs and cats digest meat 10 hours. Our digestive tract is a 24-hour digestive tract. Unless you're eating something your body doesn't necessarily like and you have the runs quickly. But normally it's a 24-hour digestive tract. In that 24 hours, as 16 to 18 of it's in the small intestine. And guess what we secrete in the small intestine along with other bacteria? Hydrochloric acid. So we produce just as much hydrochloric acid as a feline and canine, and we don't do it in concentration in the stomach. We do it in the stomach and throughout the small intestines. Now we have Campylobacter, we have Salmonella, we have a variety of intestinal bacteria that helps digest food. Acidophilus, Caucausicus, Bulgarius, all of those digest different parts of the food, whether it's protein, fat, or carbohydrates. And they pre-digest the food nicely. And if you're lucky and you have trichinosis, you digest even faster. He said trichinosis? How many people are afraid of trichinosis? How many people have been taught to be afraid of trichinosis? Yes, yeah. Don't eat pork, you'll get trichinosis. But we'll go into that later. Don't be afraid of trichinosis. It's a good thing. You can buy it and get a vial of it and drink it. And I'll explain that later. Okay? So, as it goes down into the digestive tract, the stomach secretes the hydrochloric acid, breaks down a lot of the proteins. You start moving into the duodenum. Duodenum is where the bile meets the food to start digesting the fats. So the first is protein, then the duodenum, the second part of the stomach. We only have one stomach, it just has 2 compartments. Dumps into the duodenum. The bile from the gallbladder dumps into the duodenum to start digesting the fats. Everybody know that the gallbladder does not make the bile? Liver makes bile.
The liver is responsible for mainly fat digestion.
And that's almost its sole job. Of course, it becomes like a filter in a toxic system. It does a lot of things that it shouldn't do, shouldn't have to do. So the liver makes the bile, the gallbladder holds the bile. Now we have a bile, a gallbladder that holds quite a bit of bile that can digest about 4 or 5 pounds of fat at a time. Whoever eats 4 or 5 pounds of fat at a time? When you were cave people, yes. You'd get a slab of, you'd kill an animal and you'd eat sometimes 10, 15 pounds in a day or two of fat. So you had to have the gallbladder to have a backup reserve of bile to be able to digest that much fat, or you'd be vomiting and have diarrhea galore because you couldn't digest it. So you needed that concentration of it. For our system and our society, we eat little amounts of fat here and there all day, unless you're a big ice cream eater, and then take down a quart at a time, or a gallon at a time, gallon a day. Then your gallbladder will become in handy. And I've done that, and I like it. So then it moves from the duodenum into the small intestine. And that's when the bile continues to work, all the bacteria, all the added hydrochloric acid is continually secreted. The intestines have lots of villi. It's just like going into an ocean and you see all these little creatures just moving around as the water flows over it, and all these little particles being absorbed and eaten. It's the same way our small intestine works. Exactly. As particles move past, as food moves past, they move. These particles move. These villi move, and they secrete more digestive juices to help break it down, so the villi down the road can even digest more, break it down and absorb more of it, because the particles get smaller and smaller. And then when it moves into the bowel, the most important bacteria for the human being, for its brain and nervous system, is E. coli. The most absurd and ridiculous stuff that we hear about E. coli out there, it is insane.
E. coli predigests food matter and breaks it down into the smallest proteins and fats to feed the brain and nervous system.
That's why people who get lots of colonics and who are vegetarians don't have a good balanced nervous system, because they are never feeding their brains and nervous system enough protein. It's the final stage of indigestion in the bowel. So it's very important to have lots of E. coli. And if you flush it out with, colonics and enemas, you're destroying it. You're damaging your brain and nervous system. And if you got, if you're a hypertense, depressed, any kind of psychological problems, you are feeding it by doing that to your colon, especially if you do caffeine enemas, coffee enemas. You're irritating your nervous system directly, because your nervous system gets fed from the bowels directly. Now, as we get down into the bottom of the sigmoid colon, the body's getting ready to absorb all that it can of any fluid matter stuff that's still slightly milky in solution, and then you pass the rest out. Now, in healthy animals, there are no waste products that are harmful. It's just partially digested matter that insects and plants and earth can eat. So it's a good recycling process. They need that to keep the ground organisms healthy and strong. So we help them, they help us grow things. Animals eat them, we eat the animals. It's a good process. When we become toxic, eating toxic substances, inhaling them or breathing them, those poisons get into the bowels and the urinary tract. What about the urinary tract? What is that all about? Why are we constantly losing fluid? Well, normally you don't. Look at the Aborigines. They don't drink any water. They live in a 140-degree desert and they don't drink water. Anybody see the rabbit-proof fence? There's 3 little girls that run away from that orphanage, and they're not even orphans. and the British have subdued them because they're half-breeds, they're half Aborigines, half English. So they don't think that their Aborigine parents belong to them. They belong as wards of the king, the queen. So they put these little girls in an orphanage. 3 little girls run away. They travel 2,300 miles on foot without ever drinking water. What do? Break a plant off, let the vegetable juice drip into their mouths. They'll take a root out of the ground, grate it, wring it, and drink. Can you imagine going about 300 miles on 4 ounces of vegetable juice? That's the way we were made to live. How many of you can do it? Not easily. That's how far from health we've evolved, if you call that evolution. So, the urinary tract is a place to dump fluids quickly if you need to thicken your blood to keep warm. Goes from day, let's say like in the Aborigines. Daytime can be 140 degrees. Nighttime can be 70, 60 degrees. That's quite a temperature change. So they need to release some of the fluids. Since they don't eat a lot, their urine is very little. For us, the way we drink fluids, coffee, soda pops, the whole works, constantly dumping fluids. Constantly. And what does that constant wash do? It cleans a lot of our nutrients out with it. Now, a lot of people say, well, the urine is very filthy, it's dirty. Well, the urine is nothing other than the blood without the red blood cells and with a little ammonia put into it from the kidney. That's why a lot of vegetarians drink their urine. It's a very antiseptic, important, healthy nutrient system. And did you know that your astronauts, that's what they drink when they're up there? Goes through a filter and they drink their urine. That's what they're drinking, their urine. So if the astronauts can do it, you can do it, right? But think about it. There's a lot of people who do drink their urine. And they do it in Ayurvedic, like lots of people in India do it, because they don't eat protein. They're vegetarians. So they're not getting enough protein, so they recycle their protein in their urine. There are tribes that eat fecal matter because they don't have enough protein. They go behind a water buffalo. The first time I saw it was in about 1971 in a National Geographic film. Starts off, you see this woman, black hair, blue eyes, very diminutive little person, probably about 40 years old. She looks like she was about 28, 25, somewhere around there. And you can't see what she's eating at this point because her hand is like this. And you just see her smiling and happy like this, and they pull back, and you see this big water buffalo tail swishing in behind her head. And you pull out, and she's got this big old buffalo patty she's eating from. Big old buffalo patty. I thought, oh my God, that was in my vegetarian days, and I thought of eating a lot of things, but never eating shit, But here she was eating it, and she was vitally healthy. And I didn't understand that until I learned a lot more, because here's this pre-digested matter. It's 50 to 75% digested from these herbivores. So, of course, it takes us just a little bit to digest and get all the protein and the fats out of it, because vegetation in our system doesn't work. Our system is too fast. An herbivore has a digestive tract 2.5 times longer than ours. 2.5 times longer than ours. It's 30 times the length of their torso. Ours is only 12 times the length of our torso. They have 2 to 4 stomachs. We have 1, 2 compartments. They have 60,000 times the enzymes to disassemble the cellulose molecule to get the fats and the proteins from it. So when we eat whole vegetables, leaves, stalks, and roots, leaves, stalks, and roots, those are vegetables, not a fruit of a plant. A zucchini, a cucumber, a tomato, those are fruits. They're not vegetables, okay? Leaves, stalks, and roots are plants. That's vegetation. When we eat those, they go into our system. They're only digested by 1/3. And that 1/3 of that is we digest all the fluid from it, most of the fluid from it, which contains vitamins, enzymes, and minerals. That means all of the protein and the fats, most of it, that is in the cellulose, undigested in our systems. Just begins to be digested as we dump. Another problem with vegetation, if you're a raw fooder, is that it over-alkalinizes the intestinal tract. And remember, we have lots of bacteria in our intestines and hydrochloric acid that are all acidic. So if you put that alkaline fluid in there, guess what you're doing? You're neutralizing your ability to digest your animal foods. Milk, cream, cheese, butter, no matter what it is, meats, you're neutralizing your ability to digest them. So vegetation isn't good for us to eat whole. Pretty bizarre, isn't it? But if you're a cooked food eater, absolutely. If you eat cooked meat, it'll putrefy, it'll sit in your intestines and not move. So you have to eat raw, whole vegetables with a cooked meat meal to make sure it goes through, that you have some enzymes and vitamins in there, and it helps balance the over-acidity from cooking meat. So the average American diet, if you eliminate, the popcorn and the potato chips and all the other really bad garbage, especially the fried, foods like breaded chicken legs and stuff like that. If you eliminate that, you can always kind of rebalance the system. There are tribes in New Guinea, that whole area in southern Asia, where they eat that way. They eat only cooked meats. They only have a few diseases. They have gout, they have arthritis and rheumatism, they have some spinal problems like scoliosis, and they have some osteoporosis. But that's about it. They have about 5 diseases, besides CJD that they get from doing some funny things, eating people. Then they get, then it gets a little crazy. And it can deteriorate their nervous systems. But they have only 5 diseases. And they eat only cooked meats. So, and with their vegetables, they do eat leaves, stalks, and roots to help things move things through. So you can get diseases by eating that way, but they're not as complex and as bad as ours are. But if you're on a raw food diet, eating whole vegetables is the wrong thing to do, because you won't digest your dairy and you won't digest your meats and you won't digest your eggs as well as they should be, because you're alkalinizing and causing them to be neutralized. They won't be effective. So remember, if you're eating cooked foods like cooked meats, cooked dairy, whole vegetables, okay. Not great, but okay. But on a totally raw diet, you do not want to eat whole vegetables. Okay? The carbohydrates in the human system are a problem, according to Columbia University. They found that the human produces advanced glycation end products, AGE, and they do AGEs. What they do is they collect at a rate of 70 to 90%. If you're an unhealthy person, such as a person with diabetes or a kidney problem, those advanced glycation end products store in your body for the lifetime, 90%. For the average healthy person, 70%. 70% of a waste product stores in our body for a lifetime? Aren't we eating the wrong thing if we're eating high carbohydrate diets then? Absolutely. Absolutely. So all these sports people are out there pumping up on the carbs. What happens to them? What do you see happen to them? Mid-30s, they dry out. They lose their ability to be athletes, most of them. By the time they're 40, they're shot. And you can see them just drying out. Now, King is the only one, Mary Jo King was her name, is the only one that does. She got fat in her later years and put that fat back on her body. But before she got that way, she was drying out just like McEnroe and the rest of them did. Because they're living on carbohydrates that don't have any fat in them and not enough protein. They're just drying inside and out. And if you're drying on the outside, you can better believe you're more dry on the inside. Because the body is always throwing its toxic fats off through the skin, so that at least, even though they're toxic fats, they're lubricating the skin to quite an extent. So you can imagine how dry the inner body is. So, carbohydrates is not part of our system anatomically, biologically, or biochemically. It doesn't fit. We store too many advanced glycation end products. And those are just from raw foods. Raw foods create advanced glycation end products. Every time we utilize a carbohydrate, it produces advanced glycation end products. When you cook, you're adding more advanced glycation end products, plus you're adding acrylamides and a lot of other toxic sugar substances, and they store at the same rate. Sounds like the wrong food, doesn't it? Well, you say, well, what about the primates? What about our ancestors? You know, the monkeys, the gorillas. Look at the gorillas. They'll kill an antelope and eat 28 pounds in 2 or 3 days. They only do it once every 28 days. It's like their period, you know. They kill an animal and they eat all of this meat at one time. And they don't eat ripe fruit. The gorillas only eat green banana. Have you ever tried to eat a green banana with its peel? It's like alum-meat. And it's like, how do you get enzymes enough in your mouth to make this go down? It's so dry. But they do. That is their system. John Goodell, when I was so sick and unable to move very much, I became a film editor. And I edited a low-budget production that was pretty good. So it took me about 2 years to edit it because we lost money and didn't lose money. And then the guy that was in the editing room next to me was John Goodell. He got the Academy Award for a film called, I think it was 1971, called The Beginning. He went around filming animals giving birth and through pregnancy. So he lived with a gorilla for 30 days in a cage until she had her baby. And it went just like this. She was kneeling out in front of the cage. She goes, walks over to the corner, gets off into the corner, has one more contraction, the baby's out. 2 contractions. Wouldn't that be nice? The women who are on this diet and have children, 2 contractions. Sherry Giacchetto just had 2 contractions. You know, she had one, first time it happened, you know, she says, okay, I think it's going to come. And her husband says, the head's already crowned. And then one more contraction, it was out. 2 in a row like that. Pretty amazing. She's the only one that allows me to give out her name, but there are others. So that's the way we should be, that healthy. We should be able to enjoy everything that happens in the human body if we're healthy. So he also showed me some film that he wasn't part of his film, and he was a good friend and cousin, or he was the uncle or something, of Jane Goodall. And he was out there with the gorillas before she was, and they followed these silverbacks for months. And they noticed they were all eating these green bananas, and they couldn't do it. So they took a bunch of these bananas, put them in the back of the Jeep, and carried them and followed these gorillas until they all turned yellow. Put them out there for the gorillas. So the gorillas came up curious. It's like they'd never seen them before. You know, and I'm sure they're hanging there all the time. Some of them get yellow and they don't eat them. But they were just curious that all these were yellow, and here they were presented before them. So they were going out there and ripping them off, you know, going like this. They would squeeze out all over, you know. And they were just playing with them like this. It took them probably about 45 minutes, and they started peeling and eating them. Guess what happened? They went crazy. All of a sudden, they got sugar high, and they couldn't stop eating them. And they started fighting over them. So the biggest gorillas, they killed one of the adolescents and broke the arm and leg of another. They just went crazy. These silverbacks are huge, strong animals. So it's like 10 men in one gorilla. You know, so they couldn't go in there and remove the bananas. They had to wait a whole week for all those bananas to go away before that tribe could calm down, and it took them about 10 days to calm down. So, you know what happens to children when they have sugar? They go nuts. So do some adults. Too many. Right? So, you've got to watch what you do with sugar. Even if it's good raw fruit. What else does it do besides make your nervous system go crazy? Why does it do that? You have to understand that in the citric acid cycle, citric acid is used along with pyruvate, which is made from protein, to utilize fat as energy. No matter if the fat is made from carbohydrates into an acetone as a fat to utilize as fuel, or it's straight fat from an animal fat or a plant fat. It takes citric acid, only 5%. 15% pyruvate acid, along with that, which is protein. Pyruvate. The rest, 80% fat, gives you the greatest amount of energy, just like the gorillas. Can you imagine having 10 times your strength? And that's what we all should have. But every time you got an injection in the arm, it weakened your arm by 5%. Your shoulders and your arms. Every time you got a vaccine, it had reduced it by 5%. It would take 3 years to catch up, and you could only catch up by 2%. So you're always 3% behind from every vaccine. Then you wonder why you don't have the strength of a monkey or a gorilla. Now you take a look at the chimpanzees and the killer monkeys. What happens when they eat sugars? High fruits, even though they're raw. They get crazy too. The killer monkeys will eat high carbohydrate fermented. They wait till it is advanced ripeness, till it's already developing alcohol before it gets into the body. So they're eating a tremendous amount of alcohol with all this sugar. And they do that for 24 hours before they go on a killing spree. And the killing spree can last from 24 to 48 hours. And they'll kill other monkeys, they'll kill anything in their sight. All from the sugar. Bats do the same thing. The sugar bats do the same thing. They get a high concentration of over-fermented fruit, and they just go crazy. They don't kill each other, but they just go crazy, buzzing around like a mad bee that's fed syrup instead of honey. So, proteins. What do proteins do? What do we do with proteins? With protein, we make enzymes. Enzymes disassemble food substances. Anything that we take into our body, enzymes disassemble it, fractionate it, so that we can reassemble the molecules into a system that's appropriate for us. Plus, it's the building structure for everything in our bodies. You can't build tissue without protein. Now, we know we can't get protein from vegetation. There's not much protein and fats in grains. We can't digest nuts. It takes an herbivore to digest nuts. Nuts and legumes. We can get the starch from nuts, just a little bit of protein, and a little bit of the fats. Unless you cook it, of course. Then you absorb a lot more, but then with lots of toxins along with it. So, protein from meat sources or animal sources is the primary digestible protein. Very easy for us to digest. If you don't believe that, try eating some raw meat. Find that all those problems you have with the cooked meat just disappear. Unless you're eating too much of one kind of meat that's not right for your system. Too much red or too much white, not enough of either or the other, wrong combination. And we'll get into that later. So, what do we have next? We have the most important nutrient in our toxic society, fat. And what does fat do? Fat gives us the most powerful amount of energy that we can have. It lubricates our system, it protects it, and it makes solvents to clean the body. 3 important processes, very important processes in a toxic world. What happens in a thin person if they don't have fats to arrest the poisons? It goes into their cells and damages them terribly. So, everybody should get fat in our society, especially if you haven't been on a raw food diet long enough. I'm just going to take a moment and get her something. It's honey and coconut cream. Just take your finger in it. There you go. You take more than that. It'll soothe your throat. Get more. And just leave it in your mouth. Just leave it in your mouth and it'll drip down to your mouth, okay? There you go. It'll soothe your throat, okay? You're welcome. Okay, so fats. You notice that in all the research there is out there, where do they find the largest concentrations of fat? The largest concentrations of poisons in the body, toxins. In the fat. The fat does not get harmed by these toxins. It buffers it, absorbs it. If they're live white cells, blood cells, which are mainly made of fat, yeah, they can be damaged. But when it's pure fat, there's no damage. If you don't have the fat, the body goes in and pulls it out of wherever the fat, they can find the fat, and that's mainly in the nervous system. The brain and nervous system are 60 to 80% fat. The tissue of it, the myelin. The whole brain itself, 60 to 80% fat. Yes, if somebody calls you a fathead, you say, thank you. Because I'm protected. The brain's protected. If you don't have a fat head, you're in trouble. Because those poisons are going to damage the neurons. And you're going to lose more and more brain cells. Of course, we have the biggest brain of all species, right? But we're the dumbest. We're the only ones that pollute and kill each other like for oil and garbage, you know? Why? Because we don't have a healthy brain. We don't think properly because there's toxins there. There's industrial toxins. Take a look at the way humans used to be 100 years ago. Dedicated family people, very compassionate people considering everything and their hardships and not having the industrial society that we do. And they were always tight-knit. Of course, they feuded, between, races and stuff like that. But when it came to the family unit, They were much more grouped together, and you didn't have all the needs, constant needs, because you're not well. Nobody's satisfied today. Back then, it was easy to be satisfied. You had healthy food right off the earth, no pollution in it. Everybody was pretty happy. I remember when I was a kid, and in Alabama, my mother's side is from Alabama, and you talk about, prejudice. It was there all through the 40s and 50s, and they had the colored restrooms, and it was men and women went into the same one, and this was in parks and everywhere. They were separated, really segregation, and they couldn't even drink out of a white people's fountain. It was they would kill you if you were a black person and drank out of a white person's fountain. That's how bad it was. However, even under all of this terrible suppression, I never saw any race as happy as when I would go through the cornfields and all of that, watching them pick the corn and eat the raw corn, eat raw meat right out of the fields. They didn't have time to cook. They were basically still slaves, even though they were supposed to be emancipated. And they were happy. I mean, they would get out there with a fiddle and just dance on the porches and these shacks. Happy. Why was it so easily for them to be happy? Because they were forced to be more raw eaters. They didn't have the convenience of cooking 3 times a day. Everybody was out in the fields or somewhere working. So they ate a tremendous amount of raw foods, including raw fat, lots of raw fat, and lots of raw meats. Now, I thought it was savage because that's the way I was told to think. It was savage and ugly, and I didn't see beyond that prejudice because that's the way I was raised. But now I see it. A lot of you are unhappy because you are not healthy enough to be happy. Your body's craving something all the time. How are you psychologically, emotionally ever going to be happy unless you can please the body? It is your married until death partner. There's no divorce unless you take a gun or some other means to kill yourself. But it is till death do you part. You better love your mate. And that is your first and ultimate mate. How's it going to be happy? Explore that. Wonder why so many people have so much and they're never satisfied. Why? There's something wrong there. And I watch these African American children and adults working so hard in the field, so many hours, and then they get home and they eat their one cooked meal a day, and they're dancing and singing for 2 or 3 hours before they go to sleep. Dancing and singing and rejoicing. You guys work 8, 10 hours a day. You come home and brood all day and watch TV. Why? It doesn't have to be that way. It shouldn't be that way. And I'm going to help you find a way out of it if you don't want to be in that state. Okay? So, fats are the most important nutrient to protect you. I'm going to give you an example. Once a year, I go to Asheville, North Carolina. And there is a group called Earth Haven. They're all old-time hippies, and I mean older than I am, and I'm 60. And these people, some of them are older. And they were long-term vegetarians. We're talking 35, 37 years, down to 22 years was the youngest. Vegetarian that long. All of them sick. One of them there went on the diet in the closet for a whole year. And this guy really had raccoon blackness all around here, gray skin, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, couldn't digest a thing, allergic to everything. He couldn't even breathe with ease and comfort. So he went on the diet and in the closet the whole years go by, and what are you doing? What's changing about you? You know, why are you going through this? He wouldn't tell them because he knew that if he told them, everybody there was strict vegetarian, die-hard evangelistic vegetarian, so he didn't tell them. But finally, the results were so tremendous at the end of the year, he told them. 20% of them freaked out, 80% of them went on this diet. 80% of them. They started raising pigs, goats, cows, milk, chickens, everything. The whole place changed in like 3-5 months. Completely changed around. Became very happy. They asked me to come and lecture there. So my third year there, all of a sudden this guy comes in and he looks like he came right out of a motorcycle gang. I went, woo! I looked at him, I'm doing his consult, and I said, it doesn't make any sense. I said, your organs inside look pretty good. You almost look like you're only 30 years old. And he's about 55, 56. And I said, look, I can tell by your skin because the poisons come out of the skin, remember, like I told you? Most of them come out the skin. His skin was so damaged, it looked like he had done alcohol and drugs for about 25 to 30 years. So I said, I can see the damage that you did, yet iridologically, I could see that his glands and organs inside were relatively clean. And I said, it doesn't make any sense because you're only like maybe 30 pounds overweight, 25. And he said, 4 months ago, before I started on the diet, I was 300 pounds. Even with bad fat, it protects you. Even bad fat protects you. So people who are overweight and fat, be happy because your insides have been protected better than anybody else who's thin and pretty. You know, 100 years ago, if you were a skinny woman, you wouldn't even have been chosen to be a wife or a mother because the chance of your dying in childbirth and making it through a winter were minimal. So it was the voluptuous woman. And you've heard the phrase fat and happy. You know, you've got some buffer there. You've got some ease. And that's the way I like people to be, especially if they're sick. Get fat. And I'm talking fat. You say, well, Aajonus, you're not very fat. Yes, I am. I'm 26% body fat. You know what 26% body fat on is a man? That's obese, according to our science. But I only look like I'm maybe 12, 15% body fat. Why? Because fat molecules, when they're raw, are small and tiny. When you cook fat molecule, it swells just like popcorn. Little grain, pop, big. 10 to 50 times its normal size when you cook fat. So I have all this fat on me, but it's distributed pretty well, and it's solid. Everywhere it's solid in my tissues because it's good, strong fat. Takes a long time to get those old fats out to get the system down. I've been, 30 years doing this, eating raw. 36 years eating raw. Eating raw meat only since 1976, September of 76, when I ate that rabbit. My introduction. Actually, the Eskimos gave me the introduction, but that was high meat, very high meat. And they called it high because it makes them high and happy. Why would it make them high and happy? Going back to protein. Why would rotten meat, spoiled rotten meat, make you high and happy? Remember I told you about the E. coli breaking down the protein into the finite molecules that could feed the brain and nervous system? Guess what those molds and bacteria do? They pre-digest it for you. You can absorb it in 20 minutes in your system. That's why I advocated in my book eating high meat for anybody who has psychological problems. And those psychological problems usually disappear 10 to 20 minutes after you eat them. And it may last for, 24 hours, it may last 6 hours, it may last for a week. Depends upon your system, how starved your nervous system and brain are. So back to the fat again. This guy was able to sustain all of his cocaine, all of his drug problems and alcohol because he had all of this fat on his body. Fat, fat, fat. I have 3 wardrobes. I go from a 30-inch waist to a 37. So I have a 31 and 32s that I wear, and then I have my 34s that I wear, and then I have my 36s that I wear that stretch to 37. 3 wardrobes, so I allow myself to go up and down. Now, in my book, in the Recipe for Living Without Disease, I suggest that you gain the weight. 6 months later, you take it off. 15, 20 pounds, more if you can handle it. But that's just something I do because so many people are afraid they're not going to lose the weight. When you're on a raw diet, that fat can go very quickly. Very quickly. So I like people to wait till their body takes them into a flu or a cold, which is a detoxification, to do that. Let the body take you there. It knows better than you know what to do. But I just said that in the recipe book. So those people who are paranoid that now they're fat, they're 20, 30 pounds, only 12 pounds overweight, and they're freaking out because now they're fat. They're not really fat, but they have more fat on them than they've ever had, and they freak out. And I just want them to know that they can lose it, and then after they do it a few times, they don't worry about it, and then they can keep the fat on longer. But I like people to keep fat on for 2.5 years. I would like people to be fat for 30 years. It takes 40 years, according to Pottinger's work and Howell's work, with animals that they got sick to get to optimal health. It took 5 generations. 5 generations of animals to get healthy again, to get to optimal. Well, for us, 5 generations of cells, 7 to 7.5 years per generation of cells. So that means 38 to 40 years if you're a 100%er. I've only been eating raw meat on a daily basis since December of '82. So I'm 14 years into it. 24 years into my 40 years. Jesus, I'm 60 years old. 2 months I'll be 60 years old. 60 years old. And I went to sleep. I got up at 10 o'clock last night. I haven't been asleep since 10 o'clock last night. I've been setting up this thing, doing this whole thing. I'm not even tired, not even a remote bit of tiredness. All this energy, all this ability. I can stay focused. I can do things like I was never able to do as a child. I'm getting healthier every day. And it's amazing. Most people are losing cells every day, and life gets difficult. And you've seen those people who tried to get across the street, and you're yelling at them, come on, come on, come on. They can't help it. They've only got about 22% of their body cells alive. They're carrying the 100%, Give them a break. They don't know any better, Got to have some compassion. But you don't want to get in that state. And you will never have to if you listen to anything that I've said today. You will not have to. You can reverse all of that and go the other direction. I was supposed to be dead at 21. They told me my pancreas would never work again. 4 years ago in October, I was asked to go to Washington University Medical School in St. Louis. They did a whole workup on me. They said I had the best working pancreas they'd ever seen in their entire careers. And you're talking doctors that are in their 60s were doing these things, these tests. These guys had been around and seen a lot. They never saw a pancreas take a blood sugar, and that's the first sugar I had had since 1972, I think it was. So, but I did take the glucose tolerance test. So I was buzzed. But they never saw a pancreas take the sugar level all the way down to 54. Usually stops about 104. But my body got rid of that sugar and had all of that insulin to do it. Tons of insulin to be able to handle to take it down to 54. I was a juvenile diabetic. They said I would never have a working pancreas. Never have a working pancreas. You can change everything. Patient, tenacious. Can work for you. Okay? So, fats. Let's go on to what can we do about detoxifications. Why are we diseased? Civilization is the cause of about 80% of our diseases, 70-80% of our diseases. Remember I talked about the cooked food, people eating, raw meats. They have maybe 5 main diseases that infect most everybody in those tribes. Why do we have so many diseases that have never existed until in the last 80 years, 50 years? Why? Because of industrial pollution. What happened with the Black Plague? What was the Black Plague about? An infectious disease? What were they burning in their homes, in their fireplaces, cooking with? Coal. Coal. The British government, French governments, all of them, especially British government, made coal available. What does coal have in its tar burning? Mercury. Mercury. People were burning without proper insulation. They were burning coal in their homes. They were poisoning their whole bodies and nervous systems by just burning coal. You can do that by burning wood. The tars are very heavy. Vegetable oils are impossible for you to digest properly. So when we press them and eat them, you're in trouble. Why? Because an herbivore who normally eats vegetable oil has a body temperature 101 to 105 degrees. Ours is 98.6 and lower, except a few times when we go into fever. So what happens with vegetable oils in the human body? They crystallize and harden. When did heart disease and arteriosclerosis become a big thing? When margarine came out. Hydrogenated oils came out. They were blaming the hardening of the arteries and heart disease, when little there was, on fats, animal fats. But they were the culprits, selling the thing that was going to raise arteriosclerosis and heart disease to an enormous rate. Vegetable oils causes your hardening of the arteries and the hardening of the heart. It crystallizes in the human body if it remains in there over 3 years. Say you have a cell, a bone cell, a cartilage cell, a tendon cell that lives 7 years, anywhere from 5 to 7 years. And those cells are made of vegetable oils. And the arterial walls, 6 years to replace the arterial walls. 3 years of hardened crystallized fat in there. Your body can't break it down, can't dissolve it. So it just keeps building thicker walls. Plaque keeps building. Thicker and thicker. Not because of cooked animal fats. Those tribes that I mentioned, no heart disease, no arterial sclerosis. Not any. So it can't be animal fats. Not even if they're cooked, because they cook them. And they don't have that. It's not their problem. The Maasai, the Samburu, Fulani, the Eskimo, they eat raw foods. Almost 100% raw foods. The Fulani eats 90% raw dairy, 10% cooked meat. Once in a while they have some raw meat. That is the least healthy of the tribes, but they have no disease. They just don't get along as well as the Samburu, Maasai, and the Inuit, the Eskimo. Can you imagine going through your whole life without one cavity? Pretty amazing. The first cavity among the Eskimos was found in 1886. And that was in an Inuit that had left his tribe and lived in the British colony eating their sugars and breads for 50 years. It took him 50 years of eating that garbage to get one cavity. The first case of cancer among the Eskimo, who became civilized, also living in the colonies, took 2 generations of living in the colonies. 1936, first cancer found in the Eskimos. Raw meat, raw fat, lots of it. And man, ever eat seal meat? I mean, the fat on it's like this thick, and if you squeeze it out, it is 80% oil, fish oil. And I mean, you're eating that, and you're not used to it. Yeah, you get a little indigestion there, you just go, you want to vomit. But I mean, the concentration of the seal meat is like, it's so black. It looks like cooked sirloin. And the fat is so juicy and tasty, even though it's very heavy, and you need a lot of bile to digest it. But it is so dense in nutrients that I have to eat with our foods, even though they may be grazed animals. I may eat 1 pound to 3 pounds a day to be satisfied. If I eat seal, I can eat 3/4 of a cup a day and not eat another meat meal. It's amazing, amazing, the concentration of food that those Eskimos get. And they stay fat. I mean, not huge fat, but they stay fat because, can you imagine, would any of you let your naked baby crawl around on an igloo floor on ice, naked, butt naked? Would any of you? You just freak out. Oh, that baby's going to get pneumonia to die. And these little babies are running around on the floor, butt naked, crawling on the floor, going like this, on their backs, on the ice. These are healthy babies. These are healthy children. Why aren't we that healthy? They eat raw food, raw meats, raw fat, blubber, lots of it. And they're healthy. They're not in a lot of pollution unless Bush and the gang get their way and pollute it even more than the Valdez did. But it's a pretty pristine area so far. So fats. There's nothing I can say more than fats. Praise the Lord for fats. Because they will protect you and they will get you out of disease quicker than anything else, especially if you have cancer. Cancer is nothing other than the body's inability to dissolve dead cells and eliminate them. Nothing other than the body's inability to break down and get rid of dead cells. So it mummifies them and puts them in little stations. Spreads it all over, and when it can't spread it all over anymore, it builds tumors. What has to eventually happen? Your body has to dissolve those, or you're going to start impeding functionality, especially if it's esophageal or lung or intestinal, and it starts blocking passages. How are you going to get the nutrients into your body that will dissolve those dead cells and get rid of them? And what happens when your body gets rid of them quickly and you don't have the fats? What is a cancer cell? A cancer cell is your best friend. It produces viruses like that. Massive amounts of them once it dies. It's just a basket of solvent. It'll help you dissolve all those dead cells, all those dead mummified tumor cells. 2 to 5 days if it's in the brain. It can do it that quickly. Now, the waste product that's left over, do you have enough fat to bind with those poisons? Or is it going to go and start dissolving the live cells as well? It's going to start melting all the surrounding tissue that's healthy. Unless you are fat, you are going to have complications. Does anybody know Samuel Epstein, Dr. Samuel Epstein? He's an octogenarian. He's considered one of the world's greatest experts on cancer. I was in a lecture that he gave one time, and he had everybody stand up, and he said, okay, women, look at each other. One of 3 of you is going to get cancer and die of miserable cancer. All the men, look at each other. One of every 2 of you is going to die the same way. One of every 2 men, one of every 3 women. Cancer. Get fat. Get prepared. So you get those toxins out of the body so they don't kill all those cells to cause cancer. Get them out of your body. Get protected with them, at least so you can bind with them so they don't do damage in your system, so they don't keep killing live cells and you accumulate dead cells. Because that's what happens. Fats, fats, fats. Fats, fats, fats. Get fat. This is the land of Hollywood. You know how many actresses and directors, and especially females, that I have say, oh, I can't get fat, I'll never have a relationship. I said, when's the last time you had a relationship? Yeah. If you're that skinny, you're not going to have a good equilibrium. Nobody's going to want to live with you. And it's true. And I mean, one woman was a producer at ABC Films, and she's 49 years old, and she says, I don't want to get fat. I'll never have a relationship. And I said, how many relationships have you had in your lifetime? Maybe 30? And I said, what was the longest lasting one? 3 months? I said, you're doing good. You're doing real good, aren't you? Why don't you get fat and see what happens? Took me 8 years to convince her. 8 years on the diet to convince her. And do you know what happened? A year after she was fat and groaning, and she was happier all the time unless she was thinking about her weight. She met a guy who was 15 years younger than her, was an ex-Chippendale model, loved her. I mean, she was funny, she was smart, she was brilliant. And when she was relaxed and when she was fat, she could be funny as could be. So this guy loved her to pieces, was doing her twice a day. And I mean, that relationship lasted, and then she got skinny again. And guess what happened? She wasn't relaxed and happy again. So the relationship broke up. She said, why did it break up? I said, get fat again. Get fat again. But they don't listen. I mean, just think about it. Smart, brilliant, funny, and happy at the same time. And when you're not, what are you? So think about that fat, thin relationship thing, men and women. Okay? Forget it. I mean, I've been huge. When I came back from the desert after gaining that almost, 50-some pounds, I mean, I had almost a 38-inch waist at that time. That was the biggest I'd ever been. I mean, I'd been big when I was little, but I was a littler guy. But obviously, when I was that way, I didn't care, because I didn't know. So it worked for me. God, if I hadn't been fat with all the stuff that I had gotten from the doctors all those years, I'd been dead back then. So we're going to go take a break in a few minutes, and then we're going to talk about everybody's favorite subject. Parasites, bacteria, fungus, all those good things. So you better eat before I talk about this.